And at one point they went back, it had disappeared, and then it came back again. It's a clear-cut case of an implant, and I think they're probably a lot more common than people realize.
Oh, I think so. You know, Timothy Collins been on my show 4 or 5 times. Now, like, again, I mentioned earlier in the show, he had an implant removed by the late Dr. Roger Lear. And when they sent it out to the lab, it came back as a silver compound, but other things were added with the silver that could never have been formulated on Earth. And that is eerie. And then what was funny, after he had his implant removed, he saw another UFO off to the side of a hill, him and his wife, at a stop sign where they live. And then, you know, they looked at it and then they drove off. And I said, did you ever go back to the doctor and see if for maybe they, you know, you were taken aboard again and maybe they put the implant back in you? He didn't want to go through it again. He just didn't want to.
I get it, yeah. I have to respect that. Yeah. You know, going back to whether ETs are our friends or not. You know, it's a very difficult judgment, because what I found, I think if you examine the accounts, you can see this, is their behavior is very much like ours. It falls under the same umbrella as human behavior. Might be slanted slightly towards the more benevolent, but otherwise, you know, very much like us. And going back to something you said, James, earlier, is could the Greys be us from the future? And I think that there's, you know, you can march out a number of cases that absolutely support that. And the fact that the Greys are interbreeding with us and producing humanoids, I think essentially we're probably a lot closer to the Greys than we realize, and are essentially, you know, probably share the same genetics, the same species. But what the story that's come from the Greys is that they reportedly looked like us at one point, but had a genetic damage due to a conflict of some kind, nuclear or chemical. It's different in various accounts, but otherwise very much the same from multiple different abductee accounts, that Greys once looked like us, but suffered genetic damage, and that's why they're here in large numbers, is to replenish their genetics.
Yeah. Is there any other thoughts of groups out there? I know it doesn't do any good to write your congressman or your senator. They probably don't even get it. One of their office people get it and probably toss it in the garbage. I hate to say it, or whatever they do with that correspondence. But I mean, I don't know. I'm just confused right now. Why do you think Trump all of a sudden, let's backtrack. You know, like 2 years ago, all of a sudden that Nimitz film all of a sudden appeared on all the news channels and then on the internet of these two fighter pilots chasing a UFO. Then a couple months later after that happened, the Secretary of the Air Force, talking to the cadets, graduating cadets, says to them, the next war won't be a world war on the planet. It'll be in space. Then 2 months later, approximately, Trump jokingly says to the reporters, gee, I think I should create a space force. And then, boom, he moved on it. What is going on?
Yeah, well, I think that's what we're seeing. I mean, how can I put it? I think the Space Force is inevitable. There's a lot of reports coming out from whistleblowers that there is sort of a secret space race. The whole trip to the moon never stopped. There's bases on the moon. I mean, and there is evidence to support this. I talked to one NASA guy, and he swears up and down he saw photographs of stuff on the moon that was absolutely artificial. And I looked into it, and I'm like, wow, this was years ago, before it was a real popular subject. Talked largely by Richard Hoagland and his work. But yeah, there's all this secrets going on, and that's kind of, I think, why we're having movement now, is because there's so much going on that you can't keep it all secret, and it's leaking out. There's an enormous number of whistleblowers now, and more people. This information cannot be contained. It's turned into what we would probably label an open conspiracy. meaning more people believe the government is, covering this subject up than even really know about the subject itself. We all know the government is hiding this information on this subject. So that's kind of why I think that they're trying to move forward with this. It could be pressure from the ET side. It could be pressure from other governments saying that if you don't do it, we will. I know pilots have had a real hard time with this because they're on the front lines with this and aren't allowed to talk about it. And just think about all the people who are, employed within these secret levels of government doing things that are so science fiction-y but are real, and they can't talk about it.
No, that's the scary thing. Could it be, again, like I said earlier, maybe our time on our planet is really limited? Because, Antarctica is like melting like you wouldn't believe. Alaska this summer had temperatures of 97 degrees. Even parts of the Canadian Antarctic had temperatures in the 90 degrees, which is unheard of. A lot of weird things are going on, and it's happening now all of a sudden really fast. We got asteroids, that it's come close to, hitting Earth. One, they said, it's going to miss Earth. NASA last week said, it's going to miss Earth by a long ways. Plunk, in the Mediterranean Ocean it hit. Now they announced today that a comet all of a sudden appeared by the sun and is heading towards the Earth. It's a lot of weird things are going on all of a sudden, all around.
Yeah, there's certainly been a lot of talk about this. I think climate change is a real phenomena. I don't think that, we can see this with the melting of the ice caps and Mount Kilimanjaro and all the plastic in the ocean. We'd have real problems. There's no doubt about that with, DDT and all organic matter on Earth and so on. And that is, in fact, the number one message given to people who are taken on board. When ETs talk to someone, it's usually limited to, don't be afraid, we won't hurt you, you won't remember any of this, you need to come with us, this sort of thing. But when people do get information, it's pretty much centered on 3 different areas, and one of them would be environmentalism. And that's probably their most common message, is warning against nuclear proliferation, pollution, our warlike ways, certainly overpopulation, and all these sort of things. So they seem to be very concerned about that and are not, willing to step in and fix things for whatever reason, but warning people over and over again. That's what happened in the Rua, Zimbabwe case, where it landed at schools. So second to that, people are taken to the engine room and talked about using anything other than fossil fuels, that there are different forms of energy, and it usually ends up to be about electromagnetism. And this is how UFOs power themselves. That's fairly common. And next to that would be messages about spirituality or hands-on healing and this sort of thing, which is also pretty common. All of this speaks to me towards their agenda. Yes, they abduct people against their will, and it's very scary, and they don't have permission. But their agenda is not to hurt you. I don't think it's to scare people either. I think they're dealing with an emergency situation where our planet is falling apart. And they need to get this message out. They need to make sure humanity doesn't go extinct, which it won't, because there's enough genetic material collected by the ETs to assure that.
Oh, maybe one of these planets that are habitable, maybe they're creating another human race on that, or on one of those planets.
Yeah, can you imagine that? I'd like to believe that. I haven't. People are taken on board. I rarely hear people say, that they were taken to other planets or anything like that. There are a few scattered accounts here and there. One guy I talked to, a Navy guy, a medic, the ETs offered, and he declined. He was too afraid. But that sort of thing, gosh, it wouldn't surprise me, honestly. But,
maybe they know that our planet is doomed. If you really think about it, in the ocean, people don't realize. I've seen pictures from Google of parts of the ocean. Ships came and go because it's all littered with garbage, plastic, and everything you can think of for miles and miles. Dead stretches. You got the nuclear reactor and reactors in Japan. They've run out of room to store any more of the waste. That keeping the reactors, what's left of them, cool, for they don't melt down anymore. They're talking about they're going to have to release it in the Pacific Ocean. What's that going to do to all the fish and all the out there? It's going to kill them. We already got radiation, on salmon and stuff found in Washington State and off of California. If that happens, we got that. We got the Antarctica going, Greenland going. We got the super volcano or over in Yellowstone. It could go anytime. There's a lot of weird things that's happening all at once, and it's all coming down to a point. You know what? It's like when you're a kid. You can sit there and you can hide stuff for a certain length of time. Like your parents come in your room looks really nice and clean. No, you got everything hid under the bed. You got under the dresser or whatever. We've been hiding stuff, okay? We've been convincing ourselves none of this stuff is going on. Scientists for years saying, oh, no, Earth change isn't happening. Well, guess what? Everybody lied to us.
Yeah. Well, I think this is probably sort of the crux of the whole UFO situation, because what we're seeing is limited UFO activity in terms of the history on our planet for centuries. Yes, there's evidence of ancient aliens. We can see that with petroglyphs and hieroglyphics and cave paintings and Renaissance paintings and so on. But starting pretty much coinciding exactly with the nuclear age is when these UFOs showed up. Probably not a coincidence. A number of researchers have pointed this out. And apparently we set waves out throughout the universe that we were messing around with technology. According to some reports, this technology itself was fed to us by ETs. So this is all very curious. And within the space of, 50 years, we've practically destroyed our planet.
Didn't take long. Did it? It didn't take long. If you go from the 1950s to now, we have really screwed up our planet.
Yeah, and this is exactly when UFOs started showing up in large numbers. The book I worked on most recently, Schoolyard UFO Encounters, all the cases that I found in there began in 1915. Every couple of years, these UFOs would hover over a playground, over a large group of students, and basically announce their presence. In 30% of the cases, they actually land. In some cases, humanoids come out. And this is a clear sort of publicity campaign to announce their presence, which I think sort of coincides with the whole abduction phenomena, which has been an effort to wake people up and improve the species in some way. I don't know what's going down here, but it's very strange and very alarming, and it shows all the signs of, getting worse. So I don't know. I think we're going to have a real rough time with it. This is the message coming from the ETs if we don't shape up in terms of pollution.
Yeah, we got to do something because I don't think we have much time. Al Gore was right. Everybody made fun of Al Gore and said he was, crazy and all this stuff. And, even Al Gore last month said, you know what? Everything I told you is happening. Nobody would listen to me. And we got to do something. I don't even know if the ETs can help us at this point. It's really scary. I also want to say you want to go check out on Amazon a book called Area 51 Warning Keep Out. That's Area 51 Warning Keep Out. I think it's a good book to get and read. I think even you have something in it, Preston, don't you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've been working with Tim Beckley for many years. He was kind of I think he published my first article. No, actually, it was a newspaper that did, but he was the guy who really helped me break out into the mainstream of UFO research.
Yeah, he's a great guy. We got to go for break, and the last half an hour, whatever you want to talk about, Preston, you got it. So if you want to talk about your latest book, or if you want to talk about, UFOs coming out of the ocean, but, whatever you want. You got like 3 minutes to make that decision. Go get yourself a cup of coffee, come back. James, stay away from those sugar frosted flakes during the break. We'll be back in 2.5 minutes. You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio.